All right, welcome back from that report. Also coming up on the show, analysts have said that the tariff war between the United States of America and China would have a spillover effect on the Nigerian economy, resulting in the worsening of the trade deficit between Nigeria and China. Now, the Donald Trump administration levied a 25% additional tariff on import from Canada and Mexico and a 10% additional tariff on import from China. In response, China has filed a formal complaint at the World Trade Organization and banned the export of 5 major metals: tungsten, indium, bismuth, tellurium, and molybdenum to the United States. Additionally, they announced a 15% import tax due to be placed on U.S. coal, liquefied natural gas, and the import of cars. Now, according to the National Bureau of Statistics Foreign Trade and Goods Statistics of the third quarter of last year, China remains Nigeria's highest trading partner on the import side, cornering about 24.36% of the nation's imports. Now, Principal Consultant Woodridge and School Consultant Segun Shokbiton joins me now on these conversations. Many thanks for joining me, Segun, on the show.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
All right, let's start with the news that was all over the space yesterday. The central bank and, of course, the new ATM withdrawal policy. It practically affects everyone. Okay, let me try and understand this. Let me get your thought, really. At a time when there's been like spillovers of planned tariffs, increases here and there, the POS that Nigerians rely on, are charging practically new levies since the introduction of the electronic money transfer levy last year. So most POS now, before you even want to withdraw, they give you an additional 50 or 100 naira. Just yesterday, the central bank came up and said that Nigerians will, from March 1, be paying a fee of 100 naira each time they withdraw from other banks' ATM. How did that reach you, and is that the best way to go, really, Segun?
Well, I think one would have to look at it from different perspectives.
Okay.
If you want to look at it from the implications with regards to an already shrinking purchasing power, within the economy, then you might wonder why this is coming at this time, because this is additional pressure, and these things, they kind of work hand in hand. So there's that, and then we're talking about telecoms tariffs also going up, so there's pressure from every side on the disposable income of the average Nigerian, and that has the potentially damaging effect, impact on the ability of the economy to grow. Because if people cannot spend, it means they can't consume, and there's no consumption, there's not going to be investment. If there's no investment, there's no growth. So these things kind of work together, and I think policymakers have to be very careful about, implementing this increases in tariffs and fees and charges. That's on the one hand. But the other angle to look at this from is I saw it and I wondered, in the first instance, how many times, when was the last time anyone listening to this can remember going to a bank ATM to withdraw money successfully? A lot of these ATMs don't get funded with cash anyway. And you will recall that just a few weeks ago, the CBN actually sanctioned 9 banks for failure to service their ATMs properly and ensure that they were loaded with cash at all times. And we have analyzed this issue, talked about it over the years, and found that there's something of a racket going on there. And what you find is that, I will not mention the names of any banks, but you typically find that somewhere very close to the majority of the branches of these banks, especially in highly densely populated markets and areas, what you find is that there's usually a slew, a large number of POS operators around those branches. That bank branches ATMs will not be loaded with cash, but all the POS operators around them will have cash. So at the end of the day, you wonder, this increase in ATM fees, is the CBN trying to move the cash back to the bank ATMs by increasing the charges that the banks apply, to withdraw from not on us transactions? Or is this the CBN just saying, look, operating expenses have increased within the economy, it's time to review some of these fees and charges. So that's why I said there are different ways to look at it. For me, I would have expected that the CBN should wield the hammer thoroughly, like they did with those 9 banks, do so for every bank that continues to be in default of providing cash in the ATMs, and not necessarily kill the POS operators, but ensure that they are a second resort, and they are, where you go to in an emergency, either because the queues at the bank ATMs are too much, or because, maybe the bank has closed, they've locked their door, and the ATM is inside, and then you go to a POS operator. Not that, as it is today, the POS guys, the first port of call for anybody that wants to withdraw cash. Because you go to the bank ATM and there's no cash there, or you go to the bank ATM and you are limited with the amounts that you can withdraw. So the CBN needs to fix that problem. When ATMs were introduced, it wasn't like this. You go to the ATM and you get what you want. So I think that's what the CBN needs to deal with, not increasing what people are already paying at the ATMs.
Okay, Shegun, another way to look at it now would be some sort of buck passing, as it were, because right now, in my opinion, in my head, I'm thinking the CBN is actually discouraging people from using, the banks or ATMs rather of other banks, because sometimes when I just can't really find my branch, a branch of my bank around me, I have to go to the next one, which might be another bank. But right now, don't you think with this development now, it will be an avenue for these POS operators to even increase their charges? You know how it happens in our country, our dear beloved country.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see that, and that entire chain, of funds flow is something that you really need to examine. Like, how do these POS guys always have cash? Who's supplying them and who's being paid what? It's all very. I think it's a racket that the CBN really needs to look into. Yeah, but it's also important to explain, especially for the ordinary viewer who just want to understand the basics of this and how it affects them. The new tariff, first of all, the three free withdrawals that you get at the beginning of each month is gone. That's one thing to note when you are withdrawing from other banks that are not the bank that gave you your card. That's one thing to note. Then the second thing to note is that the new rate is 100 naira for every 20,000 naira withdrawal.
Yes.
Prior to now, I think we were paying. I think it was 65 naira. I can't remember.
On the 65 naira on the fourth withdrawal. Yes.
On the fourth withdrawal, exactly. So that could increase or it could reduce depending on how much you're withdrawing. Before it was a flat rate, it's 65 naira for every withdrawal. So if that ATM allows 20,000 naira as a single withdrawal, then you pay 65 naira for that 20,000. But what this is saying is now is that you will pay 100 naira for that 20,000. However, if it's 10,000 you are withdrawing, you are going to be paying 50 naira, and if it's 5,000, you are paying 25 naira because it's saying 100 naira for every 20,000. So in a way, this might actually result in a reduction for some people if you typically don't withdraw large amounts of money. When you visit it, then you'll probably be paying less. So it's not all doom and gloom. There's a bit of a bright side to this as well.
Okay, there's also, before we leave this conversation to the tariffs for the telecoms, there's also that aspect of the off-site ATMs, automated teller machines, that is which is subject to about a surcharge of not more than 500 per every 20,000 will apply in addition to the statutory 100 naira fee.
I mean, that I don't understand because it would have, for me, it means that the CBN is trying to discourage off-site ATMs. That steep jump from 100 naira. You are basically saying it's going to be 600 naira for every 20,000 for off-site ATMs. And for the ordinary viewer who doesn't understand what off-site means, it simply means an ATM that is not within the premises of the bank that owns that ATM. Yes. So you put an ATM in a shopping mall, or in a hospital or whatever, then what you pay for withdrawing money from that ATM is significantly higher. So what you find is that people are not going to use it because it's significant. I mean, 600 naira out of every 20,000 naira, you are talking about 3%. It's too much. So I think is the CBN trying to stylishly discourage banks from taking their ATMs off site. This have a connection with the cashless economy policy. Are they trying to discourage access to cash and force people to do transfers more? So there's a lot probably going on there that we need to unravel.
All right, let's leave the CBN ATM charges now to telecom tariffs, which has been in the news for quite some time, with a lot of reactions and counter reactions from different aspects of the economy. With the NLC, planning to do some sort of protest if that continues. But from what we hear, there are still consultations ongoing. But from research and from interviews gathered on the street, one of the major telecoms operator is actually now charging this rate, and a school of thought says it's even charging higher than the approved 50% right now for just data and SMS, and that of calls have not been affected. What are your thoughts, really? Because I feel negotiations are still ongoing, and yet implementations have started.
Well, for this, I'm a bit conflicted, because on the one hand, I tend to be welfarist in my economic ideology. I think that the purpose of state is to protect and encourage the citizens of the country to have opportunities to grow. And, even where that includes having to provide subsidies, where that includes having to provide access to capital, capacity development, and all of that. As a state, you should be doing that so that your people can develop. But there are costs to those things as well. And I think in this case, the telecom sector in particular has kept the same tariffs for a very long time. They've not been able to increase simply because it's regulated. For you to increase your tariffs, you have to get approval from the NCC, and the NCC has not allowed this in almost 10 years. Right? So, and we all know what has happened in that time. Inflation has gone up and come down and gone up, and now we're at the highest inflation we're seeing in almost 30 years, at 34.8 or thereabouts. So how have they been surviving? How did they survive the sharp increase in operating expenses that happened in the aftermath of the subsidy removal and the floating of the exchange rates? How have they survived that? How did they survive the exchange losses that the ones that have foreign affiliation? How did they survive those losses? The reported losses in the billions. How did they survive the multiplier effect of increased operational expenses simply because inflation is high in their operating environment, without having increased tariffs? So obviously their margins have been suffering, and obviously also they've been, I think, engaging in underhand practices, not disclosing fully. There's been hidden charges. Let me put it that way. There's been hidden charges and hidden costs that the consumer has been bearing. Finding ways for your data, for example, to disappear faster than it should. So even though you think you are using 1,000 naira, you are paying 1,500 naira for, say, 4 gigabytes of data, but in truth, the data disappears much faster than it ought to, and you end up paying more, because you need to buy more again. I think they've been engaging in such practices in the past. So this increment would have been good if it would help them recover some of this cost, but also if it's transparently implemented.
Okay.
So what I think the NCC should be doing is to provide a framework for reporting to the public periodically, maybe on a quarterly basis. Monthly might be too frequent, but maybe on a quarterly basis, for the MTN to actually audit this operator and confirm categorically how much is being paid for every single one of their product lines. And then you can provide a comparative template where you can then publish this quarterly to Nigerians to show for each of the operators and the different service categories, this is what they are charging effectively. So by the time you've taken out all the taxes and the speed of usage of data, for example, if you align all of that, how much is a consumer paying for using data from the red operator to the green operator to the yellow operator.
All right, sure.
So I think if the NCC can do this, then maybe it will help, create confidence amongst consumers, and they will feel less cheated. At the moment, people are feeling aggrieved because they don't have a say in this matter anyway. Whatever happens is going to happen. There's no replacement. It's one of those places where you're a captive.
Okay, quickly.
Yeah, you can't go anywhere. So.
Quickly, as we round off for sake of time, as of the third quarter of 2023, there was according to the MBS, the data revealed that trade deficit between Nigeria and China stood at about 7.54 trillion naira. But my question right now, with the ongoing, if you like, trade war between the United States of America and China, what with Trump's taxes and tariffs, what impact would this really have on Nigeria-China trade ties?
I think beyond the deficit, because the trade deficit, our deficit, against China to increase, and that will put pressure on our naira, because it's one thing for people to want to buy products from abroad. It's another thing for those products to be pushed deliberately to you. Where your markets are being deliberately flooded because some other markets are becoming unfriendly for those products. So when that happens, what could happen is that your currency experiences pressure, and you might experience devaluation of some sort. Because let's not forget, China, contributes significantly to the things that we import into this country, 24 to 25% at any point in time, right? So there's pressure on your exchange rate. There's the increase in prices as a result of that as well. Now, the other thing that I think we also need to be mindful of is inflation will likely result from this trade tariff wars. Who's going to pay the 25% that Trump has slammed on Chinese products? Who's going to pay the 50% that China has slammed on American products? It's the consumer. So inflation is going to go up in those economies, and with inflation going up, the central banks in those economies have to respond by increasing rates. When rates go up, what you find is that earnings increase for investors in bonds, in the bond market, in the stock market, and that might take monies away from our economy. The desperately needed liquidity that we were looking for in Nigeria might flow in the opposite direction there, because there's better earnings elsewhere, and that will be negative for Nigeria.
All right, it is unfortunate. We just hope that this gets resolved, because they say when two elephants fight, it is the grass that really trembles. Many thanks, Sheikh Moshokito, for your time on the show today.
Have a wonderful day. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's the size of the show for today. Many thanks to all of you who have sat back to watch. Let's just keep our eyes and let's just keep the conversations flowing on social media about the new ATM, new tariffs again, new charges on withdrawal, and of course what's happening in the telecom sector in terms of tariffs. My name is Justin Akademi. I'll see you again next time. Bye for now.